should people be worried about job loss with AI? And do you think it's going to be something that our country and the world has to tackle with?
Yes, there will be jobs that are going to change more rapidly than others. And I think my advice for people is to really think deeply about how you can learn AI now.
For the audience today, we have a very special guest, Stephanie Wong. If you've been following along with us, you know that basically we have been really doing a bunch of episodes on AI and its current capabilities and future implications. And today we're going to talk with someone who is way smarter than us and will do a much better job in kind of weaving the story of like how we got here, where we are today, and what's next is what I would say. So with that being said, I would like to introduce Stephanie Wong. And if you can just grab a few seconds and tell the audience who you are and give a little background.
Yeah, definitely. So I currently am the head of technical storytelling at Google Cloud. And what that essentially means, in short words, is I make the technical digestible. Really, I work on go-to-market and product marketing, majority for our AI launches. So focusing on recent launches around Gemini, as well as our other models like Imagine and Veo, how they relate to Google Cloud. And what my goal is to build and inspire a community of developers who want to build on Google Cloud.
Amazing. And then I believe that you have your own podcast YouTube channel. I was digging in a little bit on a previous episode, and this may catch you off guard, but you did a prediction episode about a year ago. And I was going through some of your predictions, and one that really hit home with me is that you have this section talking about AI assistance and how it's going to like reimagine engineering, right? And so we've been playing around with tools like Replit and a few others internally in our engineering team, and we're kind of like blown away. Our CTO says that he feels like he's watching man discover fire for the first time. And so I would love to kind of like have you double click on and really start there of like, what is exciting to you about AI assistance? Because I think that's one prediction that you definitely nailed. So if we can start there with like the AI coding assistants, where they're at today, and what do you think like the next 6 to 12 months looks like in that space?
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, like these are my opinions. They don't represent, my employer or anyone else that I work for. But yes, I agree. I think it's crazy because that prediction episode felt like a very long time ago, and it's already played out so quickly, and so much has changed. But one thing's for sure is that code assistance with AI has dramatically changed the field. And it will continue to, especially with the advent of more capabilities in frontier or foundation models like 4.0, Claude, Gemini. And on top of that, there's a whole ecosystem around it that's being built too, right? So you see these startups like Replit, Cursor AI, and a lot of other tools that are helping not just the basic code completion aspect of it, but a contextual understanding of your team's code base. So if you're in the travel industry, you have data around, very specific industry specific data sets, user data or travel data or any kind of internal systems. And so AI tools today are really getting better at taking the context that you have from your specific company so that it can not only make suggestions on code, but tell you how to improve code, do unit testing, do quality assurance, how to actually improve the efficiency of your engineering teams given the systems that you have running. So a ton is just happening quickly in the industry. And I think, if your company isn't quite looking at AI today, the barrier to entry is lowering significantly for your teams to just start out, maybe not with old or legacy code bases, but hey, use it for something that you are starting up, like a new project, or perhaps you want to actually translate old legacy code language into newer formats so that you can move faster as a team. That's my suggestion.
Interesting. So one of the things that we're doing internally, we have a product that's been in market for about a year, and when we first built it, like any messy startup, we made a bunch of assumptions that were wrong. We didn't have the right architecture to like start. And so we're going through this internal discussion about just rewriting it from the ground up using AI. And so we've been going on this journey for the last month, and I would love to get your feedback of our engineering team seems to be of the opinion of like that we can actually rewrite it faster and like basically take the moment to rewrite it using AI and using like modern tools. And by like creating the right foundation and having these tools, it'll be faster to like rewrite it from scratch than to actually like just keep fixing little things and like bolting, kind of like almost putting patches on the problem. I wonder if you've seen people or like in your professional life have kind of gone through the same thing of like, is AI giving you the opportunity to like start fresh?
Yeah, well, that's the classic tale of technical debt, right? Like in a
Yes.
startup's journey, like the more and more you build, the harder and harder it gets to implement. But the reason why people do move fast is so that they can grow essentially, and then they put those problems aside for a later date. And so I think AI does give you the ability to maybe re-architect earlier on, or maybe figure out like pieces that are easier or lower hanging fruit that you can target to rewrite. I would say that it's still going to continue to be a challenge. It depends on how big or complex your code base is. That being said, AI is going to make it much easier for you to identify areas that you can improve quickly. In terms of rewriting the whole thing, I have seen that actually with companies like I was mentioning earlier, saying, hey, we are writing in a very old legacy code and we want to translate that to, something that's like better or higher level, a JavaScript or a Python, so that we can actually take advantage of newer tools in the system. So AI is making it easier for teams to actually be able to do that. Normally, it would take hours for an engineer or developer to do that manually. So in those cases, I think it's not a complete lift or shift or rip and replace situation, but how can we convert using AI as a collaborator in this process? Because otherwise it's too daunting for us to take it on as an individual team.
Okay, I have a question. And you're going to notice that Kenny's using dev team jargon and terms, and then I just come out of nowhere for like the Karens listening in Wisconsin that are like, what are they talking about? As far as uploading like an entire code base goes and letting something like fully learn your product, how, like, what does that process look like? Is it similar to just like uploading something to like, give me the inside baseball and how that works?
Yeah, so when it comes to LLMs today, there's this concept of context windows. And if you're not familiar, it's basically like a model having access to a memory or a memory unit or storage where it can basically go in, dig out information that it needs to have context about what you're talking about and say, okay, yeah, I took a look at this repository of memory of information and I can provide you a better answer because I have more information. So maybe taking a step back. It's kind of like, I think you can look at LLMs as like a puppy that has never been trained. It's been trained on a lot of information, but you still have to teach it how to sit, how to bark, well, not how to bark, but how to sit and how to like respond to certain
No,
commands,
keep the
right?
analogy going. Yes, totally. The more you give it, the better it'll reward
Exactly.
you.
Exactly. So a context window is basically like if it has a big context window, basically it's kind of like saying it has access to a big bookshelf of additional information you can give it after it's already been trained with basic information, right? So you could say, hey, this is information about my family, about my house. This is very specific to my business. Now I want you to actually learn how to sit, but only in Italian because we speak Italian, for example. So these days, like what's really impressive is the context windows for models has become bigger and bigger. So for example, Gemini has access to one of the biggest context windows in the industry. It's 2 million tokens. And tokens are essentially representative of about 2.5 like letters each. So it's a lot. It's books and books of context that you can upload. So when we're talking about a model having access to your company's code base or your company's database of information, it means that you have the ability for the model to have expanded understanding of your code base, of your company's business itself, and answer questions much more comprehensively than if it just had the basic training available to it.
Are there companies in the software stack that are working on just like the memory and context window issue, right? Because like there's some things where you need more than 2 million tokens, which I think like roughly equates to like a PDF of what, like 1,500 pages, like in that neighborhood, right? Are there people, and I know I do want to touch on your stints in various like venture capital spots, so I think this would be like a good bridge too. But are there people that are working on lengthening the context windows and like making the memory bigger?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say first and foremost, the big model providers are working on this and they are equipped to work on this because it does require research teams. Of course, it requires compute capacity and infrastructure and, all the chips. People, are aware of how competitive it is today. So just having the research teams available to work on these difficult problems is helpful. And it's pretty impressive. Like I mentioned, the 2 million token context window, there's a growing demand for it and they're increasing that window over time. But increasing the context window isn't the only way to make a model more performant or accurate. There's also other ways that you can essentially expand or extend models. So for example, you can do different setups like RAG, which I won't go into the details of, but essentially it means that the model can go and grab information from an outside system, like a database, or some other API that it needs access to. This kind of goes into the world of agents now.
Yeah.
And so context windows are one way to make the model more comprehensive, but it's not the only way to increase not only the accuracy, but like the up-to-date freshness of what it can provide.
And while we're on that train, tell me a little bit about hallucination, because this is my favorite part about language learning models. how they like spontaneously hallucinate. You can double check with it and it's like, sorry, I was wrong there. Here's the correct answer. Is that something that we're getting away from? And when it like originally launched, that was kind of something they were working on? Or is it something that's always going to happen when you're working with LLMs?
Yeah, well, so to give some background on why hallucinations happen, LLMs are trained on a set of data from, of course, a vast array of internet sources and everything available to it, right? But that training process happens periodically, right? So you're going to go and scrape the internet for this information at a certain point of time. So that means it's a snapshot of what the internet looked like at that time. So, of course, it's going to pull information that may be out of date. It may be wrong in some cases based on what it was trained on. So hallucinations are typical of LLMs. It's probably always going to be an issue if you were just to serve the LLM as is, right? But a lot of the tools that you're used to seeing in the industry, like GPT or Gemini or Claude, they're getting better at not hallucinating because there's layers of other checks and balances that happen, and the ability for these models to then grab information from more up-to-date sources. This happens after the training process, right? So this happens when you're actually submitting the query in your browser tool. Then it goes through these range of checks and balances. And so the way that it does that today is, like, for example, with Gemini, we have these features on certain tools called grounding. And so grounding means like, hey, when you submit a query that says something like, what is the weather in San Francisco today? Without grounding, it would say, I don't have access to weather data, but here's like historical weather data based on what I've been trained on. With grounding enabled, now the tool has the ability to go and basically make a call to Google search, and that's live data, pull the information from today's weather in San Francisco and give you a much more accurate / up-to-date and fresh response about the weather. And this works for a range of things that you enable it for, like who won the latest Chiefs game last weekend, things like that. And then you can adjust like how often you want grounding to be enabled, or I should say what the threshold is.
Awesome. I have read about this so many times and you just made it digestible. She is an expert. This is your thing. That's awesome.
I was so on your LinkedIn, you have a few different stints at venture capital firms. And so I would love to kind of just ask some questions. We're thinking about going out and raising a Series A, so I'm about to kick off this nightmarish process of running a process for fundraising. But I would love to just kind of pick your brain about like what made you get into venture capital, and do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you see yourself continuing in a career in venture capital?
Yeah, well, I've explored it in a few different capacities. Never officially been an investor at a VC firm per se, but I have partnered with VC firms operationally to help them make sure that they're building a really robust platform to provide value to the founders. I've also been a scout. I've also helped with their angel investing community. And so I'm sort of like at the cusp of getting more and more involved with my own startup ecosystem that I've built in San Francisco and beyond. And it's been really fascinating just seeing how these firms are viewing the market today, what some of the barriers are for founders looking to break into it today, into the ecosystem today. And it's been great being able to provide my perspective based on what I've learned in the AI industry. So going back to your question, like what trends am I seeing and what's the fundraising environment like?
Yeah, yeah.
I would say a lot of the startups that I've been working with to mentor and advise have been around, of course, AI. A lot of AI agent companies that are moving into specific verticals, like helping teams with compliance and financial regulation, or maybe AI agents that help with financial marketing, or AI agents that help with healthcare. And so it's been really fascinating. It's very early on, I would say, with the AI agent ecosystem today, where a lot of companies are interested in adopting AI agents, but they don't have the framework necessary to implement it with the right guardrails in place. They also are keen on doing it quickly, but there's a long roadmap that they have to first address with data quality and having the right team in place and the right tools in place. So I think with AI specifically, we're seeing a lot of activity, but I am still cautious about, where investment dollars are going to go, because there's a lot of competition and we're not quite sure how it's going to play out yet. But there's tons of interest still. So I think as it relates to your team and fundraising, I think having an AI lens is always helpful in how you build your features, but it shouldn't be necessarily the catch-all or the silver bullet to attracting VC dollars at this point. It needs to be highly specific to your industry. You have to have some sort of edge or proprietary data set to set you apart that's going to give you that angle to be resistant or resilient to your competitors.
Yeah, interesting. So we have been toying around with a few different ways to actually practically use AI in our product. And one of the things that we kind of weigh is like, do we get more ROI for making the AI feature customer facing and like making it like a shiny product that could, in theory, maybe attract more revenue and customers? Or do we look at a specific job function and say, like, we want to take this out of the org, right? And I don't know if you see a lot of other founders kind of like going through that of like, do we make it shiny for everyone to see, or do we take just in case the team listens to this, I won't name a role, but just take role X and be like, we think that
Telling
that
them you said
job
that.
will, yeah.
Everyone.
But we think that job X won't exist long term, like in our company. We think it'll be ran by agents one day. Am I thinking about that the right way, or are others thinking about like using AI in that way?
There is a lot of conversation right now about how AI will impact jobs. I still think that we're quite a ways off from AI fully replacing human jobs. I mean, it depends on what, but for the most part, for highly specialized or knowledge worker jobs, I still think we're a ways off. Reason is because we need to get to a quality assurance standpoint, a trust standpoint, a data set standpoint, and we have to have the right organizational structure in place to make sure that there are humans in the loop, right? Ultimately, it's going to fall back on the upper level management to verify, check, validate that work. And so, we're not at a point where we can just throw it over the fence and say, hey, AI, do this, and the agents will just go off and do it. So I don't see a lot of founders, from my experience, just fully replacing positions. That being said, if it's super early stage and you have one founder technical founder, one business leader in the company, AI will significantly enhance your operations and efficiency if you use it right. So if you aren't using AI tools today, you're doing yourself a disservice as a founder, especially in the technology space, if you're not using AI. I would say in terms of having AI be a collaborator or having AI be customer facing and built it into your features, absolutely. I'm seeing that across the board, at least in Silicon Valley, of course.
Sure.
I think one of the lowest hanging fruits is how can we enhance our customer support organization with AI, right? And there's so many tools out there, right, that are helping with that space. What it comes down to is measuring the ROI, make sure that when you implement it, you have the right approach on it, the right strategy, data sets, support organization to actually learn how to effectively use it so that you're not 100% relying on it. And making sure that, you're making sure that the experience is actually good for your customers at the end of the day. So it's not a silver bullet, as I mentioned, but it's some way to actually enhance your existing organization. Also, I will provide caution on this because I recently was on LinkedIn and I saw one startup, I won't name who is an AI startup that helps with essentially networking, right? So it goes out and identifies leads or other folks in your network. It reaches out, has conversations with people, and they didn't have the right checks and balances in place to make sure that there was not bias in place with how they were reaching out to women versus men, and it caused a big PR issue for them. So when you're using AI as a feature that's customer facing, there should be an immense level of scrutiny before you roll out features to production that may impact not only your customers, it could have like larger impact on your community and society. And so just make sure that you have the right like bias ethical team in place, like evaluations to check the accuracy and the bias of the AI tools themselves.
That is kind of funny. It's like a lady AI that just hates men. It's just a little sexist. That's hilarious. The AIs all start getting like really niche personalities.
Yeah.
You're about to
ahead,
go on a long rant bit about funny AIs. Don't do it. I want to talk about your podcast because this was something that Kenny was like, all right, we're going to start a tech podcast. It's going to be great. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Anybody can start a podcast, but how many people make more than like 10 episodes, right? So the fear kicked in. And once we started recording on Riverside and just like it gets easier as you go, but I just want to hear like how you started yours. How did you find your co-host and kind of like its genesis story?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm very early on in the podcast journey as well, but I have a ton of experience doing it for my full-time roles, leading marketing and building developer communities. And you both know that starting and continuing a podcast consistently is very hard.
The maintenance
a
is
lot
the hard
harder.
part.
Yes, it's harder than people lead it off to be. And so I would say for our podcast / YouTube channel, the way that it happened was I wanted to create my own content around tech, investing, the market, sort of like anything that comes to mind on my journey. And I happened to essentially share a bunch of fascinating visuals about tech companies on my Twitter and LinkedIn, and it blew up. It became viral. And I got reached out to by someone saying, hey, thanks for sharing it. This is really helping my marketing. And I realized that it was my friend. So I didn't realize he was the author. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. So we put our heads together and we're like, what can we do together? We really respect each other. I love working with great people and brilliant people. So why not? So we decided to go through a pilot of making our first videos, and we did that for about a year. And then I decided to start this podcast like within the YouTube channel so that I could continue meeting and growing my network of founders, VCs, people in tech, like anyone in my ecosystem. And so that's sort of the genesis of it. But I will say like continuing consistently and getting leads on top of a full-time role, it's hard.
It's Christmas time. Kenny's like, we should record a podcast on the 23rd. I'm like, no,
Oh, I did not
Just
say
trying
that.
to
Stop
keep it
it.
up it is tough. And then life comes in the way and you're like, maybe not this month, just do it so it can stay consistent for sure.
I would say that the weirdest thing about running a podcast, and you could probably speak to this, isn't it weird what things take off and what things don't? Like we have videos that absolutely crushed, and then we have videos where we're like, oh, this is gonna be so
We
good.
worked really hard on this one.
And
And
then
then
it's
the
like-
one
It's so
of the
true.
lady like kicking the guy's back of the seat in the airplane just takes off. You're like, maybe
Yeah,
it's our
I
audience,
think,
Kenny.
Well, it's a good lesson, right? It's like don't over-index on any one episode, which is true because that same thing happened to us. And you just have to keep iterating. All you need to do is, it's all about consistency at the end of the day, right?
Totally.
Building the systems is more important than the outcome a lot of the time because if you look on YouTube stats, for example, there's like a very small percentage of channels that actually reach higher than 10,000 subscribers. Like the drop off rate is massive from there. And so it's not about the best content, it's about who's in it for the long run and going to stick through.
Yeah, we're at 103 episodes. I never thought we were gonna get past
Literally,
like 25.
what? No, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I thought we were gonna do like 25 and like fan it out, but we just kept on. Like I had this goal of like if we just do 100, I wonder how it'll like shake out. And we got to like meet like interesting people and like yourself and a bunch of others. So I think like net, it's a good thing. But it is a big time suck. And do you outsource all the editing and the clip making and all of that stuff?
Yeah, and we did, right? So we hired an editor, we did the visuals and everything with an agency, but now with AI, bringing it back to
Yeah.
AI, there's so much that's possible, especially for podcasting, that makes it easy to just use these subscription browser-based tools. So for the podcast, I was originally hiring someone and they would go in and I would have to give them notes like, hey, at 3303, please delete this word and, cut it here.
So much.
I realize now with Riverside, Descript, and a bunch of other tools, it automatically removes any pauses and mess ups. You can edit using transcription of words instead of watching every minute
Yeah.
of the full video. And so I basically started using that more effectively for podcasts. Now, I don't want to, like say, hey, editing jobs are at risk, but I do think that there's certain use cases where it makes sense to use AI. If you yourself like have the ability to learn how to do it, it can be very fast. But for long form video and more complex use cases, absolutely, an editor is going to give you high quality results at this point.
It's a good like first draft for sure. And then they
Right.
can go in and edit but oh my God, that was the bane of my existence. When we started this, I would go into the script and take out the ums. And it takes so long. Like, talk about AI giving you hours of your life back. That's my best use case for sure.
Stephanie, I have a kind of a question looking into the future. I feel like you get a well-rounded look at kind of AI and where it's going. How worried, honestly, should people be worried about job loss? Like I look at some of this stuff and I'm like, I can't see a world that it doesn't impact certain jobs. Like there's a few jobs where I'm like, that's a 5-year and then that job is done. Like there's some data science jobs that if there's X amount of data scientists, I can't imagine in a few years that like that number will be consistent. And maybe I'm picking the wrong field, but should people be worried about job loss with AI? And do you think it's going to be something that our country and the world has to tackle with?
Look, I would be lying if I didn't say that it's not prudent to think about the future of jobs and how they will change over time due to not just AI, but technology and software in general, as it has been. It's just happening at a faster rate. But I think a lot of it is going to be a conversion of skill sets too. If you think about accountants, they were doing manual calculations on pieces of paper, and then there was software that came out. Now we have Excel, right? So the job isn't disappearing per se, but it does require a new set of skills that are going to be demanding in the short term for you to learn to defend yourself and protect yourself against being replaced by someone who can do those. So yes, there will be jobs that are going to change more rapidly than others. And I think my advice for people is to really think deeply about how you can learn AI now, right? And The great thing about AI is it's not something like Excel, right? It's actually a lot easier if you just get into it little by little, because they're so browser based. There's a lot of like UI, easy to use tools. You can talk into a phone these days. You can just produce images. And so not all of it needs to be complicated, but it does require you to sit down, understand the landscape, and just simply get started. Talk to other people who might be a little bit farther ahead in the journey than you. And so I think like for me, I've personally seen a massive benefit of using these tools in my day-to-day and in my personal life. For example, I'll give you a great example. I'm closing on a property and it's so complex, right? When you're learning about lenders and insurance and the more, everything. And what I would normally do is reach out to a tax consultant and all these other people for basic questions. But what I've been able to do is use a tool like Notebook LM, upload my quotes that I've gotten and say, hey, compare quote A with quote B. Tell me where there's overlap. Tell me which one has a lower premium, which one is better for me and my personal situation. But that did require me to give adequate context to the tool first. And so you can do that in your professional job, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in finance. The only thing I would say is like verify the output of the model, of course,
Sure.
and make sure that, it's accurate based on your understanding of it, but it can make you much more efficient. So that's my recommendation for everyone out there is like, just start with basic use cases on how it can help you think of ideas, identify risks, and do your job a little bit faster.
Totally.
All right. I think I want to ask you, and you can tell me that this will never come. Like this day will never arrive. It's not going to happen. But when are we going to have someone inside of Slack that is completely AI? It's an AI avatar. You can huddle with it in video and someone pops up and it's like, but it's all synthetic. It's 100% AI, but it has a face and a voice and it does tasks and it's just like a member of your team, but it's synthetic. Is that 5 years away, 10 years away, or will it just simply never happen?
I feel like we basically have that almost in terms of, Salesforce has Agentforce. There's a bunch of other tools where, they have integrations with Slack and other enterprise CRM or ERP systems. And the only thing missing is an avatar or a face, but it does have the ability to answer your questions and perform tasks for you, given that you set it up properly. So the only difference from there is to add an avatar. And, of course, like if you wanted to join a meeting and actually ask, like that would be a bigger step. And I think we might be at least a few years away from that. Yeah. And the other question is like, do we want that, right? Do people want that experience of talking to someone that isn't real, like physically in a browser tool? I'm not sure. I feel like that's a whole like different conversation. Yeah, technically that is possible, right? Also, there's a ton of processing required for something like that to do it real time. Is that really the best use of resources to do that job?
I don't know. Connor's kind of expensive. If I could get a less mouthy, more obedient version of Connor, I may
Oh my gosh, you'd be so
Connor.
bored. You'd be so bored.
Yeah, I've seen a startup where they basically create avatars for you. So for any video that you want to create, any kind of marketing material or internal communications, then you would be able to essentially have an AI person do it for you. And so that's useful, but I think it's like for a very particular set of use cases. And that's one thing I was thinking about the job thing. Like for me, I am a technical storyteller. I am able to make the technical digestible, which yes, an AI tool could do. But one of the biggest values of me is that I'm out there engaging the community. I am in my videos talking to people. I am on stage connecting with our customers. There is inherent value there that I don't think will ever get replaced.
Sure.
Maybe I'll be wrong in the future. Maybe there will be a hologram version of me, but it's that sense of connection with someone that I think is always defensible.
Oh my gosh, someone makes a fake Stephanie. You're like, we'll cross
there
that
might
bridge
be already
when we get there. Oh, that's awesome. Kenny, do you have any other questions? I kind of wanted to ask you like personal questions, like where you live in San Francisco. Silicon Valley is only anything I've ever seen in a TV show. What is that like? Just being in, I mean, we live in Orlando, and we don't work in an office.
Wow,
yeah. What is like the ecosystem of work like?
just to give you a sense of what it's like to walk around San Francisco, I leave my house, there's a set of 7 Waymos driving by me that are like empty slash have a person in them. And then there's like Zoox cars, also autonomous vehicles that are training and testing with their new prototype of car, which has no driver, no steering wheel, nothing. And so like that's the environment we live in, is we are surrounded by, you know, the most like innovative technology. A lot of people in the last couple of years since the pandemic have said, hey, SF is dead. You know, everyone's left. You know, why are you paying so many taxes? Like, leave. Everyone's fleeing. I
The
think that
robots are here.
are taking over. I think that that is a little bit true, but in my opinion, SF is not dead. There is so much concentration of the best founders, innovation. There's the highest percentage of AI and other startup fundraising has been in Silicon Valley and continues to be. And so I think it is a hub of a lot of technology and innovation happening today. And at least for my career, it's been hugely beneficial, because I've also considered moving to other cities across the US as well. And I keep coming back to reasons to stay in San Francisco. You know, just going to coffee, meeting in the office, going to different events. I mean, there's events, like hundreds of events per week in San Francisco around any intersection of technology or career that you're interested in. You know, AI, crypto, Web3, agriculture, tech, you know, anything. And you'll be able to find a network here. So I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon.
I love San Francisco. You guys have the best park ever. The like botanical gardens were amazing. That's my thing. That was so awesome.
Yeah, it's a great green / city space, like even compared to New York, in my opinion.
Definitely.
All right, final question, and I know that you have to wrap up here. What has been the most jaw-dropping thing that you've seen from a technology perspective in the last like month?
Oh man, there's been a ton in the last month. I mean, it's fascinating. So I don't know if this is biased or just because I'm closer to it, but Google has come out with a ton of great things recently. Gemini 2.0 is super advanced. It's a foundation model. But on top of that, we've also enabled some other products. For example, there is a tool called Google Deep Research, which
Deep
allows...
research is amazing. I'm just throwing my
Yes.
hands up.
Yeah,
It
he
is
was baiting you for
unbelievable.
that.
Yeah, if you haven't used it yet, it's so cool. It's so good. But I don't want to steal your thunder. I'm like a fan, like 10 out of 10.
I would love to hear your use case on it, because I still need to like keep testing and trying it. But just like the things that I've seen have been incredible too. Essentially, it's a tool that can scour or scrape the internet for anything that you want to build a report on. So if you want to build a report on identifying like the highest ranking public school systems in the world, and for whatever, like African American studies or whatever you're interested in, like it will do a full blown report. And it can pull from like over 200 sources on the web. And so it's really fascinating in saving you time to do this kind of like laborious work. And it provides citations, research, and everything. So I think it's going to rapidly expand the ability of like individuals and teams. But I'd love to hear, like, what have you tried it for or have seen?
Okay, so it's killed one of our products, but I'm happy that it died. It's going to kill it eventually. But so Gemini 2.0 has access to the Google Flight data set, right? And so we have customers who they come to us and they come to our sales team and they're like, hey, I'm bringing 100 of my employees and we're all going to go to San Francisco, and they live in 41 different airports. And so I want to understand what is going to be like, what should I budget for this? Like, do I go run 41 different searches for these 100 people and compile it into a table? That's like laborious, right? Well, we built a product that does this. It's expensive to run and it's a little clunky. And then it's not always perfect. And so I basically went to deep research and I was like, let me try to do what we were doing in our product, but like using Google's whole world of data, right? Because you guys have a great data set for travel. And I put in something really complex and it ran all 41 city pairs, hits the Google Flights API, and basically returns back like flight data that I can export to like a Google Sheets, and it comes in like the Word doc. And so that would have taken us so long. And it would have been like boring to do too. And then it layered in a bunch of context about the program, right? Which I didn't ask it to do, but because it's in like this like pairing research mode, it just started talking to me about like some things I should consider about the start time and the dates and when I should start to book and all of that stuff. So it was really, really cool. And that whole travel data set that Google has is gold. So I've been really pressing our team to really give Gemini like the primary look, because for us, we have a lot of like distribution issues in the travel world. So like, for example, when you're a travel startup, you don't get the airline content from everyone, right? So like for commercial agreements and a bunch of other reasons that are too kind of in the weeds for this, but like there's some airlines that don't show up inside of our platform. Like for example, Turkish, right? But Turkish shows up in Google. And so Google Flights has it. So we were basically looking at like treating Gemini like an API for airlines that we don't have inside of our product. And then basically putting it into a workflow. And this is a little bit in the weeds too, but we have some people that were part of our seed round that work at Google Cloud. And so they gave us a little look at like Mariner. And so what we would love to do is basically hit the Gemini API, or I call it API, it'll work a little bit differently, but get those airlines that are not inside of our system, and then basically train an agent to basically visit that airline's website, book that flight, and then like add it back to our database. So that's like a good workflow of like using Gemini, if Project Mariner continues on and becomes into production, that's a really cool use case for us where we would solve a multi-billion-dollar distribution issue, because it's something that the Concurs of the world deal with, Navan, Agencia, Amex, they all deal with missing content. But Google has all the content, so can you use Gemini plus Mariner to basically build a whole workflow to really serve customers and just allow them to book any flight in the world at any time? Anyway, that's me just nerding out like about it.
Wow. No, that's such, and I think you bring up a good point, because AI is something that can extend your existing tech stack, but it isn't a catch-all, right? Like you don't need to replace your entire product with it, but it's
Correct.
great to use it in niche use cases. Sometimes AI is not necessary to solve very straightforward workflows that you have for your team, but if it can go out and actually capture additional context with access to the internet and other data sources that it has available to it, then it can really help your team's effort if you don't necessarily either have the time for it, the structure for it on your team, or the technical skills.
Yeah, it was really fun to like build it out, and we had some help from some people at Google too, and so we were just like you don't even understand how big of a problem that this is for like the travel world in general, but basically AI agents could threaten like travel distribution, because like right now airlines like sell their flights in different channels, right? But if you basically can like hit something like a Google Flights API, then instead of relying on like an Amadeus or a Sabre, you could just basically say like, if this airline sells their flights on the internet, an agent can go and book them on your behalf.
Right.
That basically takes out probably about $100 billion worth of market cap of like existing companies. So
Right.
like Sabre, Amadeus, Travelport, like you could almost write those companies to zero if that happens, because so much of their revenue comes from distribution. So
Yeah.
it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure they're feeling some heat right now, right? So hopefully they have a roadmap that encompasses how they're going to incorporate that or build something that could fight against that specifically.
Yeah. I don't want them to fight. I want them done. It's the worst from a technical perspective. They just made an XML basically format to like distribute their affairs, and that was their big like innovation.
Right. And you're like, this is old. It's not really specifically innovative against what's happening today. So
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
20 years in the past, and it's one of the things as like a founder just dealing with like the aging travel tech stack is exhausting. It's expensive, it's exhausting. We need to have all this like internal infrastructure and people just to manage like an old tech stack that we have no control over. So we're very interested in how the agent world will kind of like reshape this.
Absolutely. And I think like the pandemic caused a lot of digital transformation for companies. AI is going to be a big facilitation of that happening across the board for industries like travel, healthcare, financial services, like any kind of like older or ready to be disrupted industry. And so it's worrisome, I think, but I think it's also very exciting. And I've had a great experience working with companies and startups that are either at the forefront of making it happen or ready to adopt because they want to protect their future.
Yeah, that's cool.
The airlines
Well, I
don't
think
need
this
to
is
protect
probably-
anything. They're just like, what are you going to do? How else are you going to get there?
Yeah, it's like the mafia.
It's terrible.
for
The
real.
Southwest meltdown like really made that obvious. It's like, wow, you guys really haven't updated a thing in decades.
Right.
It's nuts. But thank you so much for coming. We appreciate you. You are the perfect AI nerd to come on Travel Nerds. So I usually ask, what do you nerd out about? But I think it's pretty clear unless you have something else awesome that you're obsessed with.
I think that's a big thing right now. It's hard to avoid it in my world, honestly. But it's been awesome to chat with you, especially as it relates to how it's changing the travel industry, since we all, today, these days, we're all a part of it and experience it. So thanks for inviting me on.
Thanks for coming on.
Awesome. All right. If you want to submit anything for us to talk about, you can email us at hello@travelnerds.co. Other than that, thank you, Stephanie, and later, nerds.